I'd just like to say good morning and welcome. We are so thrilled to see so many of you here this morning. And I want to give a huge thank you to Gary and the Beltrami County Historical Society for being our hosts today. Everyone has just been so warm and friendly. I think we've got a long-time relationship going here. We hope to be back, and we're looking forward to lots of lasting friendships out of today. You have met Dianne. Dan just walked down the hall. And he is our driver extraordinaire. We love you, Dan, we really do. And he can talk to you like Dianne said about C.A.R. and Mayflower. And then Laura, back in the corner, is helping Sharon. She's the Minnesota Chair for Genealogical Records. And I'm Glenda, I'm the State Organizing Secretary for the Minnesota D.A.R. And just to give you a little bit about Dianne, well, it's a lot about Dianne. So, Dianne Plunkett Latham holds a BA degree in History and Political Science from the University of Illinois at Urbana and a JD from the William Mitchell College of Law. Professionally, she is a retired Medtronic patent attorney. Dianne has done conventional genealogical research for over 40 years. She began genetic genealogy in 2004, where she became a volunteer DNA surname administrator for both the Plunkett and the Lampert surname groups of Family Tree DNA, the largest genetic genealogy testing service in the world. She is a member of the Alden Kindred of America, AKA, it's not also, you know, those at the police station, as well as the AKA's recipient of the Genealogist Award. She is also a member of the Mayflower Society. As a daughter of the American Revolution, DAR, Dianne is the Minnesota State Society Vice Regent. We call our presidents regents, so she's our vice president. And she has been a past state corresponding secretary and, let's see, a co-chair for an NSDAR trained volunteer field genealogist, as well as a past monument member chapter regent and registrar. Other professional associations include having served as the president of the Minnesota Intellectual Property Law Association. Did you deal with China on any of that? We won't ask. Okay. And the computer law section. She is also a past chair of the City of Edina Energy and Environmental Commission. Dianne.
Great. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Glenda. And thank you all for coming out on this very cold day. I'm looking forward to sharing what I know about these various lineage societies. All of you should have a handout. Anyone who does not, we have a few extra copies. So the first thing that we want to look at are the membership requirements. DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, SAR, Sons of the American Revolution, and CAR, Children of the American Revolution, are all very closely allied groups. And usually, if you have a document suitable for one, it is suitable for all these groups. In order to join any of these, you have to have a patriot who had service between April 75, the Battle of Lexington, and November 83, withdrawal of the British troops from New York. But a common error that people make is they think that you have to have somebody who actually bore arms, who was actually in the military. This is not the case. Any type of service rendered is suitable. For example, a doctor, a nurse. I have a case of somebody who was a pig tender. And of course the Army needed meat. And so if you were the pig tender, you were actually an important person. And that does count as service. There were taxes that were levied to support the revolution. And if you're on the list as having paid your taxes, then you would qualify. If you served in the British Army, you would not qualify. If you deserted, you would not qualify. However, sometimes deserters came back. And if they had suitable service after their desertion, then they could qualify. The Hessian soldiers, you know, that George Washington at Trenton beat back, some of those then joined the American side, and those could be also have service. Okay, for DAR and SAR, you have to be over 18 years of age. For C.A.R., under 21. And for Mayflower, you have to be a descent from one of the 30 recognized passengers. Okay, choosing a chapter, you could go to the national website for NSDAR, where it lists all the states. You click the state, and it lists all the chapters, and you find the one that is closest to you. The one that will be closest here in Beltrami County would be the Lady Slipper chapter. And we have a number of members who live in Bemidji, and they would all be happy to meet you and tell you more about a DAR. We have a number of metro locations and a number in greater Minnesota. The cost is $75 for the application and $40 for dues. So that's the national dues, then there's state and local dues, so it's a total of $145. But you have to get the documents assembled, and these would be birth, death, and marriage certificates, for example, for the first 3 generations, and oftentimes those are $10 a piece. So if you don't have those, there's additional cost. Things beyond your grandparents usually are online, oftentimes, and so you don't necessarily have a cost for those. Okay, to get a DAR application, I did not pass them out with the handouts, but anybody who's interested in one, I can email them one, and I would then copy a registrar who would then help you fill it out. And I can copy the registrars for SAR, C.A.R., and Mayflower as well if you want one of those. There are 2 kinds of applications, either the hard copy, which is a PDF, and you attach hard copy documents to that, but DAR is the only society that has an electronic application where you fill out everything electronically and you attach an image of your document, so there's no paper involved. Choosing an SAR chapter, that's a lot easier. There's only 2. There's one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul. So you would be remote to that. And the dues there are $132, including the $85 one-time application fee. For C.A.R., C.A.R. has just 3 chapters, one Fort Snelling, which would be Minneapolis, the Minnetonka chapter, and the Rochester chapter. And the cost there is $35 plus, which includes the $15 application fee. Now for C.A.R., they accept DAR national numbers, so usually a person will join DAR first and then bring all their children into C.A.R. is the easiest way of doing that. Joining Mayflower, there's just one Mayflower Society, a state society in Minnesota. There are no chapters, and the dues there are $195. And they have a category for uncertified members. You pay $15 and you become a Mayflower, which means you will get their newsletter, and you might want to do that while you're filling out your application. Or sometimes you can't prove up your line because you're missing a document and that document doesn't exist, but you would like to still participate, and you can do that by being a Mayflower. A wildflower it's called. Within Mayflower there are 30 different passengers. Almost all of them have their own society. So I belong to the John Alden Society, and we have literature in the back about that, and the requirements are pretty much the same as Mayflower. Now, the main thing to understand here is these societies only accept primary documents. And so that would be vital records, church records, any kind of government record. But it's interesting that they define primary documents a little bit differently. For example, a census record is a primary document for DAR, but it is a secondary document for Mayflower. But if you have a census record, which is a secondary to them, and another secondary document, like maybe a county history, they put those two together and it equals a primary. So they kind of do things a little bit differently. And they cite things a little bit differently. In your handouts, I have a list of descriptions of how citations are written for Mayflower, and it's different in DAR. DAR makes it very simple. You just say BC for birth certificate, MC, DC, and you just go BC, BC, MC, DC, DC, you know, for a particular generation, and that's it. But it's a little more complex for SAR and Mayflower. Okay, Bible records. How many of you have a family Bible? A few of you. I was fortunate to have a family Bible. If you want to submit one of those, you have to have the page that has the date the Bible was written. That could be a copyright page or a printing page. And it cannot be in ballpoint pen. Why? Because that wasn't invented until the 1940s. So they know it's a forgery. And you'd be surprised how many people do try to give me things that they know are not quite accurate. They're not original. So we registrars do have to ferret that out. And if the child's name is listed right after the parent's name, they will take that as an indication of relationship, or if the child's name is under the child column, and so forth. And DAR has many Bible records excerpted and in their library, and we'll see how to find those. Social Security Death Index is very useful. You can pay $27 and get the original application, which will have their date and place of birth. If they were married by that time, it will have that information. It doesn't have their death information, oddly enough. They just have in there the date where the last check was sent, and the location. So you could use that as a died after date, or died before date, died after date, yeah. But you don't have the exact date in that. Other primary documents, cemetery records, a tombstone photo, that would be fine. A document from the cemetery indicating who all is buried there. And if the people are buried next to each other, that can be an indication of husband and wife or of children. I once had somebody send me the picture of a tombstone. This is the picture of my Revolutionary soldier's tombstone. And I thought, that looks like a real new tombstone. Say, when was this tombstone laid? Oh, about 20 years ago. Really? Is he actually buried there? Oh no, we don't know where he's buried, but we know he existed, and so his house is near here. So we got the closest cemetery, we just put a stone there. No, I can't use that. So you do have to be kind of careful about those tombstones. If you are going to use a tombstone photo on the back, you have to put what county it's in, what city, what the name of the cemetery is, and so forth. Find a grave. Gravers we call them, people who enter data in that, often put all kinds of additional information. They can write whatever they want. It is not footnoted. DAR does not accept it. From Find a Grave, all they will take is just the photo of the tombstone. But what the gravers put in there often gives you a lot of additional clues where you can go and look for information. And they even have their email in there. So sometimes I'll email them, hi, where did you get this information? Have you got any other documents? And about half the gravers will respond to me. Oftentimes they say, I don't know, I got it from somewhere else. I can't remember where. You know, that's not too helpful. But it is nevertheless a resource. And census records, particularly the 1900 census, for example, which gives you the month and the year of birth and how many years they've been married, that's very good. And you have to be careful how you cite these censuses. DAR has a very specific citation format, which I have listed there. A lot of times people want to just put 1900 census. No, that doesn't work. They have to know the page and the census district, the enumeration district, and all this sort of thing. Now, notarized transcripts are suitable. For example, oftentimes people took the family Bible down to the courthouse in order to get a birth certificate made for them. And the Bible page was transcribed, it was notarized and signed. We can use that sort of thing. But if it's just a Bible page with no context, you don't know whose Bible it was handwritten, you don't know what date this was created, you cannot use that. You have to have the date that the Bible was printed and who owns the Bible right now. Where is it? You have to list that also. And then you can use that page. Military records, those are always excellent. If you have a pension file for a Revolutionary soldier, you struck pay dirt, because it will tell so much about that particular patriot. I'm fortunate to have 2 such pension files in my family, and all the stories, the rich stories it tells about their lives, are just wonderful. Other primary documentation, wills, estate records, probate records. You have to go to the courthouse to get these, the court where the death occurred. Land records, they are wonderful, but land records generally are not online, and that's because the counties want to collect the money for making copies on those. You can go to the local office for I guess that would be the assessor, or the abstract. Go to an abstract company, I'm sorry, an abstract company. They can get copies of them, or you could pay the county where they reside to make copies of those. But a lot of times you don't know where they are in the book, or if there even is one, and in that case you'd have to pay a researcher to go in and look. Or my husband and I, we just have more fun. It's just another trip. We go there and make our own copies. Family records, these are interesting. They can't possibly be used. For example, I have a family history that was written probably in the late 1800s. It is signed and dated. It is in a person's hand that knew the facts of the time. What I was trying to cite it for, he was living during the death, marriage, birth of the people listed there. And because he signed and dated it, and it's in his own hand, I could use that as documentation. But oftentimes people write a family history and there's no signature, there's no date, and so you can't use it. Or they might even type it up, but there's no date, no signature, and no footnotes telling where they got the data, so you can't use that. There are published family histories. These are good for clues, but DAR won't take them unless each piece of information is footnoted, like vital records of Connecticut, volume 10, page 2, all that sort of thing. Then and only then will DAR take that sort of thing. Newspapers can be used if they are contemporaneous with the event talked about. For example, a wedding notice, a death notice, an auto accident. But if it's, let's say the County Historical Society here decides to write an article on something that happened 50 years earlier, nobody who wrote the article was living at the time of those events, and so they can't accept that kind of article. Secondary documentation, we talked about county histories. Now it's interesting, DAR won't take them unless they're footnoted, but Mayflower does tend to take them. In biographical sketches, DAR won't take them unless they are footnoted, but Mayflower does tend to take them. So there'll be some variance there. Now, the military grave markers, that's very interesting. So I had an applicant come to me, well, here's a picture of my Patriots grave marker. This is a grave marker issued by the United States, and so this proves. I said, well, I need documentation. What documentation was submitted to get this grave marker? Well, none. Okay, how did they come to have the grave marker? Well, all you had to do is prove two things. A, there's a patriot by that name, somebody with military service by that name. And B, there's somebody by that name buried in a cemetery. Well, wait a minute, the one with the military service might not be the one that's buried in the cemetery. So, no, I could not take that. And it's interesting, DAR gives out grave markers for patriots. It will not accept the grave markers of its own patriots. Nope. If you want to join, you have to submit all your own application. And likewise, the arm of DAR that gives the grave markers will not take an application, a national number of DAR, as proof for a grave marker. So it's two different groups operating in DAR, each wanting their own set of documentation. So it gets very interesting. Photographs, generally they cannot be used. You could use a photograph of a tombstone or some kind of plaque, perhaps, that was erected in the memory of the people who fought at this battle. And it was erected contemporaneously. But I've had people come to me, now this is a picture of great-grandmother, grandmother, my mother, and myself, or whatever, proving the lineage. Well, no, I can't use that. And even if there's something written on the back, you don't know who wrote it on the back, when it was written on the back, and so you can't use something like that. But I did once have a tapestry. You know how the young girls used to do the letters of the alphabet and so forth, and it had a date stitched on there, and on the back was handwritten the name of the person who actually did that. And so I could use that as proof of her age, because, you know, Sarah Brown, age 12, did this, you know, and so we were able to use that, interestingly enough. Lineage societies are not generally willing to accept other lineage societies' data. DAR and Mayflower will not accept national numbers of any other societies, but SAR will take DAR and CAR lineages if they're properly documented. And so all you have to do is give the DAR national number, and we did that on my husband's application. His niece went into DAR first, and then I used that for his SAR application. So, and because CAR requirements are identical to DAR's, that's why SAR will accept their national numbers. Okay, now once you turn in an application for any of these societies, there are two kinds of letters that you can get. Generally, you don't want to receive anything back from the society because it's not going to be good news. You're either going to get a pre-letter which tells you that you have done some mechanical thing wrong. For example, you didn't put it on the acid-free paper and they'll just send it back, get your acid-free paper. Or maybe you put some tape on there. I once had an application, it was all signed, ready to go, and then I noticed, oh no, we've got a typo in her name. I don't want to have to go back and get all the signatures. So okay, I'll just cut the signature part off and I'll save that, and then I will print a new top half and I will tape them together. For obvious reasons they didn't take that. I got that one back. So you might make some obvious upfront mistake not related to genealogy, and you get this pre-letter, and you usually have about 30 days to rectify that. Then for DAR it takes another 2, or now it's running even 3 months to get it verified by a genealogist. And SAR, it's even longer than that, and Mayflower too. And then when they get around to finally reviewing it, you might get something called an A.R. letter. A.R. is additional information requested. Any of the societies might send this, and this is a letter related to they want more information. You have given insufficient documentation. Now, if you've got a good registrar, they know what you need, and they're not going to sign something that is incomplete. But we have quite a turnover in registrars, 25% every year, and so sometimes you get a new registrar who just didn't happen to know what would go or not. In DAR, they want to have you have complete dates, month, day, and year for the first 3 generations. You also have to have the county listed. It's not enough just to list the city, because sometimes there's 2 different counties, but they've got a city by the same name. Or a city is large and it spans 2 counties that are next door to each other. So DAR wants the county name as well. If you don't have any proof for a particular fact, just leave it blank. Because if you fill something in and it comes from a secondary document, they realize you don't have the primary document, they're going to put it in brackets, which means it will not get typed into the DAR database. However, you might have enough other information to still pass muster. Okay, and you have 2 years once you receive this A.R. letter to cure it. Otherwise, they will refund your membership fee and keep the application fee. And SAR gives you 3 years to cure these type of things. Okay, there's certain kinds of patriots that you want to avoid. Now, frankly, Laura is helping Sharon, I believe, work on her application. And let's say she has multiple patriots. You want to give your registrar, or you have multiple Mayflower passengers, for example, every name that you know of, because some patriots or passengers are going to be a whole lot easier to get in than others. And you want to use the easiest one to get in. Once you're in, then you can take your time and file supplementals for all the others. I have 5 recognized patriots that I've gone in under. Out east, some women have as many as 24 patriots. If all 4 of your grandparents go back to the American Revolution, you can have 6 patriots in each line. I only have 1 grandparent, so I only have 5 patriots so far. Okay, so a new patriot, you want to avoid it. I'm going to show you how to recognize that. But be sure to key in every possible spelling, because when they transcribed those long ago, you came up with some pretty funny spellings. You also don't want to have a patriot that nobody has joined under in the last 50 years or more, because there's probably a reason nobody has joined, because there's a missing link in the documentation. And also you want to avoid, you've got a patriot, he's recognized, and you've got a number of people in under 1 child, but you're trying to get in under a different child. Now, Glenda here is working on a new child, and they tend to be very difficult, and they usually are the daughter. The sons are easy to document because they got the land, and you'll find a land record. Or they got some money in the will or something. The daughters usually didn't get as much, if anything, in the will, and they didn't get any land. And so these are much more difficult ones to prove. Okay, if you get one of these new patriot, or nobody's joined in 50 years, or new child, DAR does have online courses called GEP 1, 2, and 3. And you can take those online courses for $125 each. Anyone can, whether you're a DAR member or not, to learn how to find documentation and properly document a lineage. And we would like all of our registrars to take these courses. Okay, so we talked about red line patriots. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'll show you what a new child looks like. And another red flag patriot to avoid, if you can, is one where no residence has been established, or they have no proof of service. In days gone by, when my mother joined, you didn't need a shred of documentation to be able to join. You just put down your lineage, put down your dates and places, and you had it notarized saying, everything that I said here is accurate. That's all you needed. My mother didn't even put in her own birth certificate. And who signed as the notary? The local judge signed. My father. Okay. Now, when I got around to joining, I had to document every single thing. Thanks, Mom. But I found out that everything she said was accurate. I did find no errors in it because others in her family had joined much previous. And the information was passed down. The family has a Bible, whatnot, and it was all accurate. That isn't the case with everyone. At the turn of the century into the 1900s, people were real eager to join DAR, and they oftentimes were not truthful about some things and grabbed patriots that were not in their lineage. It was the same name, but a different guy. And they did all sorts of things so that they could be part of this new DAR organization. So that's why DAR is now very skeptical of these old applications and makes us document everything anew. Okay, so here we see an example of a red-lined patriot. You want to avoid this like the plague. Now here, this is one of my patriots, or it could have been one of my patriots. I have an ancestor, Joseph Cole Sr., and he was born in 1706. That's my guy, all right. But it says there, this line may not be used for membership in the DAR. Well, why? A few people came in long ago. So I showed it to a DAR genealogist. They says, well, did you think about the date he was born? No, 1706. It means he would have been 70 years old as a captain in the military. They did not take men over 40 years of age. Occasionally, they would take them up to 50 years, and there is one or two instances of a man who's, say, 54. That's the oldest. So a 70-year-old captain is just beyond the realm of possibility. So now what I have to do for this man is go back into the tax records. I haven't had time to do this yet, but I shall. You go into the tax records and see if he paid the tax to support the revolution. They were raising money. And if I can find that he donated money, then I have a shot at getting him in as a patriot. So I haven't given up on him. And today people are in much better health. And I know if my hometown was attacked, my dear husband would get out his guns and ammo. And I'm sure many of your husband's brothers have guns up here, hunters and so forth. And he would go down to the line and defend our town, even though he's 70 years old. But at the time of the revolution, you were lucky to make it to 70, and you were not in very good shape. Okay, another one to avoid is a new child. Now, if you take a look at this, there is only one person that has ever joined under this particular patriot. And that's another red flag. And you'll notice on the far left-hand column that that number begins with a 2, another red flag. You want your numbers to begin with an 8 or a 9 because they are the more recent applications. They will be well documented. The older ones might be well documented, but generally not. And so here, only one child has been proven, and that child's name is Ephraim. So let's say that this is valid, he's not redlined, and you are not a descendant of Ephraim. Maybe there was a daughter, Sally. Nobody is joined under Sally, and it's going to be an effort to get in. So you would want to find a different patriot to start with and join with. Pick the easiest one. Now, you can purchase a DAR record. The registrars have something called image access, so they can pull up the actual old application and see what's in it, and they can see all the documents that were submitted. You can't do that, But you could push this purchase button, give them your credit card, pay $10, and they will mail you a copy of that application, redacting the information of anybody that is under 100 years old. If you want to see the documents that were submitted, you would pay an additional $30 and you could have all the documents. Now you're taking a chance there because maybe, like my mother, there were no documents. And so you would pay your $30 and find out there were no documents. But it'd be better just to ask your registrar to look in image access and find out if there were documents. If there were, you don't have to submit them. They're already there. Okay, you also want to avoid patriots for which no residence or service has been proven. If you look at that first red arrow on the top, that lines the said Josiah Brown, he was a patriot, who resided during the American Revolution at, and that is blank. Now, a couple of ways that you can prove that is if they had a child born during that time and you prove where that child was born, you can use that as their residence during the Revolution. And I believe I have a handout showing different ways that you can prove up residence. Then next, you want to choose a patriot where the service is listed. That second arrow shows his service. And the third arrow shows the proof of that service. So if any of those three are blank, you want to avoid that patriot unless you happen to have that information. And given how long ago the Revolution was and how old D.A.R. is, started in 1890, the fact that nobody has run across this information in this amount of time is a big red flag. Okay, now sometimes you don't have the primary documents that you need, so instead you do an analysis, and this is the same process for DAR, SAR, C.A.R. or Mayflower. And so, for example, what you might do here is you know from the census that there were 4 children, and you have the birth certificate of the second child, but not the first child from which you're descended. And the birth certificate of the second child says that their parents are A and B. Then all you have to do is prove that those 2 children are siblings, and then the parents for B or for the second child are the parents of the first child. That's an example of very simple analysis. Oftentimes I have to go through many more layers than that and put together many more sticks of partial information and to be able to get an answer out of that. So this tells you how to do an analysis, and that is something that you would want your registrar to write up for you, or if you write it up, you would want them to edit it to be sure that it conforms to all these things. So you would list all the documents that you searched for and whether you found them or not, what was available. You discuss the conflicting evidence and show why you have what you have there is correct, and then you enclose all those documents. So, and I want to alert people, don't put in any more than you have to. I had one gal who, I worked so hard, I found all these documents, and they were cumulative. They all, pointed to the same thing or had the same dates and places. And I really want this preserved, so I want to put all this in. And I thought, boy, this doesn't sound like a good idea, but I haven't tried it before, so okay, I'll let her do it. Well, when the genealogists see a great big thick application, they go, uh-oh, a lot of work. There's probably a problem in that documentation. What do? They put it at the bottom of the pile. And so hers took a whole lot longer to get reviewed. Actually, she didn't have any problem in her documents, but she just put in too many. So try to avoid doing that. Okay, DAR research tools. One thing your registrar can do for you, and once Sharon gives her name of her patriot to Laura, Laura goes into the database and gets an application printed from data in the database, listing all the generations that are in common with Sharon's ancestor and her lineage. And these you don't have to document. So that's very handy. Image access, we talked about. The registrar can see the actual documents that were submitted and let you know if there's enough there. And for $10 you can order an application. For another $30 you can get the documentation as well. DAR also has something, the Lineage Lookup Board. So sometimes I would like to have a particular document. Could somebody go and look for a land transaction between these two people during this time frame in this county? We have volunteers in counties around the U.S. that can go and do that. Okay, we've got the genealogical record system and the Patriot Index. C.A.R. has a Patriot Index too. You don't have to be a member. You could just go online and see if there is a Patriot by that name in either of these indexes. DAR also has 40,000 Bible records. People like me who have a Bible in the family take a copy of it, transcribe it, mail it into DAR, and then it gets indexed. Revolutionary War records, DAR began indexing these. It has 300,000 Patriot records that are indexed. Now that it's got that done, it's going to the different states in the 13 colonies, finding their records and indexing them and adding them. They're working on Virginia right now, I understand. Okay, here is the genealogical research system. You can go into this. You go to dar.org and you click on GRS, and you can look up people based on the name of the ancestor. You look at the top there. And sometimes people say, oh, my great Aunt Maud was a member of DAR. You can confirm whether that's true or not. What gets tricky here, there's another group called Daughters of the Revolution. It is not DAR. Daughters of the Revolution was another group that was running at the same time, and they died out, I think maybe in the 40s, something like that. And all their records are held at a particular historical society. If you Google them, you find out where the records are, and you can pay $10 and get them. So people will sometimes tell me, oh, my mother was in the DAR and I absolutely cannot find her in the database. And then I go to Daughters of the Revolution, I key it into their index, and the person pops up, and then you could order the record. DAR won't accept that record, but it gives you clues as to what their lineage is. So that's one thing to be careful of. And the member database will sort that out. And the Descendants database, anybody who's in the lineage in one of the DAR patriots will be listed there. The Revolutionary War records that you see next, the Bible records, and then other resources. Now we're going to look at each of these. Here's what you get when you click the Ancestor page. You key in there first name, last name, the state they served in, as much as you know about them, and then it will confirm whether or not you have that person, whether they're a patriot. And then next, the Bible records. You key in the search, for example, the person's name. So if I entered my Joseph Cole Bible records, then they would pop up here. Also, the Revolutionary War records, that's another good one. They have a Patriot Index and other records that are there. Okay, now other research tools. There's the Genealogical Records Committee, and Laura is our state chair of that Genealogical Records Committee. And what that does is they go around to county historical societies, for example, or cemeteries, and find records that could be useful, and they transcribe them. They give a copy of the record and the transcription, and they go in this database. Also, DAR has their catalog online. They have 250,000 books in that, with 3,000 new books coming in every year. you can find out if something is in their catalog. Now they don't have a lending library, they don't circulate anything, but you could go to DC and see it if you chose to. And the way I use this, sometimes I have a citation for a book and it's not available to us here in Minnesota. I couldn't find it. But I can see from this that it's in the DAR library and it was footnoted in a county historical a record somewhere, and so I have the name of the book and the page number, and I know that page has the data that I want, so I cite it and I put that it's in the DAR library and hope that the genealogist will go over and look at it and forgive me for not sending it in. So that's one way I've used the catalog. Okay, this is where you find the GRC, Genealogical Records Committee. You key in the name of the person that you're looking for. Here's the DAR library catalog. You can search on title, author, subject. Okay, more research tools. DAR has an online store, and they have created about 8 books of references for everything for the American Revolution. It's a resource guide, and if your patriot is in one of these states, you can purchase that PDF for $25 or get the actual book for $45, and it will list all the known places where you can find information on patriots for that state. Now, I ordered one of these in PDF form, but I didn't see the fine print at the bottom that said, this PDF is available to you at this URL only for 48 hours, or it was some short amount of time. I'm not sure if it was 48, but it wasn't very long. And by the time I got over to the URL, poof, it was gone. So I wrote them back, oh please, I did pay my $25, can you put that out there again? And they did. And then I downloaded it. So you have to be careful and read the fine print as to how long anything they download is going to be there. Some free research tools, FamilySearch.org. It's a counterpart to Ancestry, but it's free. And Laura has a handout in the back on FamilySearch.org. I highly recommend it. It oftentimes, it's a pink folder back there. And oftentimes, genealogists will post their birth, death, marriage certificates, whatever, in this, and the LDS goes out and collects this information, and you can oftentimes find the actual documents there. It's hit and miss, but it is possible. GenWeb is another good place. People will post things. Find a Grave is excellent. Stephen P. Morse is very interesting. You can get the Social Security Death Index through him, but his site is kind of complicated to operate, but he's got very good, useful information. The Family Tree Resource Book for genealogists, if you're the kind of person who likes a hard copy, have something in your hands, this resource book is excellent. It's in every library. And it will tell you what date county records start for birth, death, and marriage certificates, and what kind of records are in that county. And then you can go online and find them. A lot of people these days, they'll just start online. But if you like hard copy, this is a good place. Okay, other ones, Chronicling America, another free research tool. Google and Facebook have enormous amounts of information. With Google, oftentimes whole books are posted out there if the copyright is no longer in effect. Social Security Death Index, Port of New York passenger records, Castle Garden passenger records, and states with some level of free online accessible indices. Notice that Minnesota is listed there. So we can get a lot of free online. Now, DAR does not like indices. They want the actual record. They used to take the indices quite indiscriminately. Then they got really tough about it. Maybe they'll go back to it, it's hard to say. But right now, you can try to submit an index, but usually they will kick it back. So if you've got the index, you can probably get the actual record, and it's a good idea to do so. A subscription-based tools that you do pay a fee for: Genealogy Bank, Heritage Quest, American Ancestors, New England Genealogical Historical, Connecticut Genealogical, newspapers.com. Fold 3 for military records is excellent. Fold 3 is part of Ancestry. You can get it through Ancestry, or you could go to your county library and find the military records. So these are all excellent tools. And then DNA testing is another good way to get information. And my next talk is on DNA testing, of course. And oftentimes you can match up with somebody, and what you're hoping is to hit somebody who's got the mother lode and has all the documents of the Bible that you were hoping for. And the 3 main services we'll be talking about: FTDNA, 23andMe, and Ancestry.com. Okay, and now for some SAR requirements that are a little bit different from DAR. The big thing about SAR is you don't need to document the spouse, only the lineage carrier. That makes it a whole lot easier. So that is wonderful. Also, DAR national numbers can be used for SAR documentation, provided that it's a well-documented application. So you just include the DAR application and cite that number for your documentation. SAR has a Patriot and a Grave Index. That's free. You can go there and check. Now, Mayflower requirements. You need to prove a date of birth and death for each husband and wife. Notice, birth and death. It doesn't say you have to document the marriage. I don't know why. Now, DAR is a little different. DAR says you have to have one date and one place for each of the husband and wife. And it doesn't matter if it's a birth, death, or marriage for generations 4 through the Patriot. You just need one date and one place for each husband and wife. Mayflower says you have to have the date of birth and the date of death proven for each. Doesn't say you have to have the place though. So these are all a little bit different. Mayflower doesn't accept any other lineage society's national numbers. You could pay Mayflower $25 and they'll look at your lineage and tell you whether it looks good and whether it's worth submitting. Because it's $195 to submit, so maybe you want to have them just take a quick look first to see if you're on the right track. Mayflower generally accepts the silver books, and I have a couple of them here. This is what I mean by the Mayflower silver books. There's a series for each passenger, and before the book is finalized, they are in this pink version. That means that they are working on them. Now, for the Aldens, of which I belong to, that's probably the most populous society. There's over 1 million Aldens living today, Alden descendants. My husband is an Alden descendant, making us 10th cousins. My sister married an Alden descendant, making any respective children 11th cousins, and so forth. So there are many of these silver books in the Alden series. Some of the other series where there aren't so many descendants, they do have fewer books. So every public library will have those books, and you can go online and order the book for your family like I did. DAR generally does not accept the silver books. The silver books don't necessarily have footnotes, particularly for the older information, and if there's no footnote, DAR won't accept it. However, Mayflower doesn't care. They said that they wouldn't have many members unless they accepted their own silver books, and so of course they accept them. Okay. If you want to join Mayflower, it's a good idea to join DAR first and get that amount of your lineage concrete. If DAR accepts it, most likely Mayflower will too. Then you use the silver books for Mayflower for the first 5 generations from the passenger down, and then usually you have a gap of only 1 generation that you have to prove between your patriot and where the Mayflower person starts up. So that's kind of an easy way to do it. Additional C.A.R. requirements. DAR national numbers can be used for C.A.R. Now this is interesting. Whether you double-side the application or not, you would think this would be trivial. You would think it wouldn't matter. No. A C.A.R. will not allow you to double-side the application. If you do that, they will mail it back to you and ask you to reprint it. S.A.R. requires you to double-side the application. They require you to. D.A.R. doesn't care. Either way will work. So, you know, they all have these interesting peculiarities that I cannot explain. All of them have to be done on rag stock paper, that is 25% cotton. The registrar for whatever group you're trying to join will provide that paper. Once the 2 of you decide that the application is now correct and it's ready to be signed, the registrar will print it on that paper. C.A.R. members can hold dual membership with D.A.R. And S.A.R. and then D.A.R. waives their $75 application fee for anybody who from C.A.R. wants to join D.A.R. directly. Now, tips for making your application process go smoothly. Attach all your documents in chronological order by generation. Do not use staples. Lineage societies don't like you to use staples because they have to remove them so they can make copies of them. So they should be on at least 8.5 by 11-inch paper. I had someone once who was submitting a driver's license or something, and it was very small, and so she cut it out to the size of the driver's license. What happened? It slipped out, it got lost, gone, and so that application was delayed. Now sometimes you have a huge piece of paper that the original document is on, and yes, you can have them larger, but don't have them smaller than 8.5 by 11. And then on the back of each document, put the name of the patriot or the Mayflower passenger, your name, your chapter name, your chapter number, because these they have many documents on their desk, these genealogists do. You don't want your document winding up in somebody else's file. We had one applicant where the application disappeared in the genealogist's office. It fell behind the radiator, and it took quite a while to find that. So things wind up in odd places, and you want to be very careful that yours can be identified. On your document, underline in red each name, date, place. Underline in red. Do not highlight. Do not highlight. What happens with the yellow highlighter when they scan it in, it turns black and you have redacted your information. So only use red marker there. Okay, we already talked about not using more documents than required. Avoid cumulative documents. Now, mail all your applications to whichever society, either by certified mail or by priority mail. It does not have to be either of these, but I do it just to make sure it gets there. Certified mail, it will be signed at the DAR end, or whatever end it's going to. I use priority mail because I want to be sure that it gets there in 2 days. I have had applications get lost in the mail, take a couple of weeks to get there. I don't know where it's been, but it didn't get there very quickly. I want to know when it arrives so that I can go online and verify that my prospective member's application is there. So with 2-day delivery, I know when it's going to be there. Now understand that our registrars do not assist with supplementals, only with your primary application. You're on your own for your supplementals. Also, registrars are not there to do your research for you. Oftentimes they will be very nice and do some for you, but you are expected to do your own research, and they give you tips as to where to go to find the document that you need. And registrars vary as to how much help they'll give you. Some will do a lot of research, others will do none. They aren't required to do any, actually. Okay, now the timeline. 1 week after the application is mailed, it should show up in the DAR database, and theoretically they are reviewed 6 to 8 weeks after that. Right now they're running longer than that. It's more like 3 months. It varies depending on the time of the year. Supplementals, it takes 9 to 12 months because they're lower priority to get those reviewed. After review, you'll either get a error letter or a notice of verification. And you have 2 years to cure the error letter, and in that time, if you decide it can't be cured, you can submit a different Patriot. That is acceptable. You don't pay any extra money. And in C.A.R, you have 3 years to cure your response. And sometimes I go back and forth multiple times. I send them more information. They say, well, you're closer now, but you've solved this problem, but I've still got another problem. And so you keep working back and forth. And I'm a former claims examiner for the U.S. Railroad Retirement Board. So I was on the examination side of the desk. Then I became a patent attorney. And then I was on the applicant side of the desk, so I can appreciate what these verifying genealogists are going through, and I find them to be very excellent, and very rarely do I disagree with what they say. If you do disagree, and I did have an application once like that, it was for another chapter, and I could see from the correspondence that it was a new genealogist who frankly didn't know what she was doing. And so I told them to appeal it. You can't appeal it. And the supervisor looked at it and saw that the genealogist was wrong and did allow the application. So you can appeal it, but I find the genealogist very excellent, and that should not actually have to happen. Okay. As I said, you can change to another Patriot. In DAR, national numbers are given out, you're voted in, so to speak, on the 5th of every month. All those that were verified in the previous month get voted in on the 5th of the month, and your national number is assigned. And then within a month, you receive your new member packet and your certificate of membership. So that concludes the program. If you'll have Gary conclude the program, let me know, and we'll begin question and answer. I thank everybody for participating. We sure appreciate it.